Diablo leveling is atrocious. We have nerfs and resource game problems. Leveling power spikes suck and the loot is bad. But really, the biggest disaster is level scaling, and God forbid you play a barbarian. Let's talk about the obvious first. Rogue is busted. It's probably the experience most people enjoy right now in Season 1, and it's no wonder. Sorcerer and Necro do come close, with Druid being mostly fine, but Barbarian drew the shortest stick out of all of them. But what sucks more for leveling? Well, we have the nerfs to skills. We know going into Season 1 that a lot of the skills were nerfed or some bug fixes, which is fine, sure. For instance, I'm talking about Barbarians. Essentially, they've had their Hammer of the Ancients nerfed, which was one of the ways that you could level pretty decently. Wasn't necessarily nerfed, but the bug that was fixed essentially made the skill so underwhelming that I tried to make it work. It just didn't. I had to play Upheaval, which was nice, but ended up just leveling a lot with Rend and eventually Whirlwind to get my capstone and go into World Tier 3. This is some struggle that I haven't felt on Rogue, Druid, Necromancer, and definitely not Sorcerer, which is, you know, known as the king of leveling and is just a pretty poor experience. Early game essentially is just bad overall. The resource gain is terrible for a lot of the specs, but mostly for Barbarian and Druid, which is, you know, fun enough, it has been addressed. The gear is pure ass, and the items in the game just drop at a way lower level than your character, way more often than not, which makes it very hard to, first of all, find upgrades and keep up with everything else around you. It makes it hard to keep up with the content, and it's just not fun to keep looting low-level swords. In 1.1.1, sure, we will have buffs to all of this, but will this essentially fix the issue? Well, I don't think so, and the main reason for that is Breath of the Wild. Haha. Well, let me actually explain. In Zelda Breath of the Wild, and not only, you have much more fun progressing through the game through difficult zones where the game does not scale with you. It's obviously not the same as Diablo 4, it's clearly a different game, but Zelda game essentially has way better leveling experience across the board, and it's something that you can also find in games like Elden Ring and essentially the Souls game, where you go from point A to point B, which would be the final part of the game, and you would just have fun and you felt yourself getting stronger. You enjoyed the leveling process in whatever essentially way that game portrayed leveling, and not just, you know, simple numbers increasing in Diablo, like level 1, level 2, level 3. Obviously, different games have different ways of portraying the level for your character, and these do a way better justice, and it just makes Diablo 4 feel way worse. Why? Well, because the biggest culprit for the leveling sucking is scaling. Scaling just makes everything way worse. We could live with the nerfs, the abilities, the things doing a lot less damage. We can also live with the lower level gear, and we can live with the resource issues and balance issues. But scaling will make it hard for new people to play any class, even Rogue. Maybe it will eventually make you feel like you are getting weaker. Why though? Monsters gain more power per level than you because your skill points don't add up to more overall power gain. Your gear doesn't scale with you and falls behind faster, giving you a much weaker sense of progression because you loot a sword. First of all, you're not that excited because, well, one of 20 swords will probably be an upgrade for you and the others will just be scrap or gold because they're just at a way lower level, and it doesn't help you gain the enough power to match what the monster is doing, and it takes longer to slay stuff, which is just weird when you gain more levels and new gear. And this is all most likely because skills and legendaries are tuned for higher levels, since the damage multiplies higher when you get to 50, 70, 80, 90 in terms of your level, and probably the devs don't want everything to go out of control once you reach that point. Damage scaling is just not tuned for lower level characters in lower level zones, lower level content in general. There are so many issues here. Most revolve around the damage bucket and damage types when it comes to, you know, the overall damage. I'm not gonna go into details, that's probably a video all on its own, but there are just way too many damage affixes for gear that scale your power up. Just look at this. Look at how many there are for each individual situation. So many conditions to your damage that, first of all, it just makes gearing a lot harder and a lot harder to find that one piece of item that you want, let alone it being at a level that you can use it to gain more power, but also just makes it confusing for new players because it's like, how are you going to actually plan your build ahead? And when are you going to deal more damage to burning targets if all you loot is damage to cold and chilled targets? And all of this just makes it so that there is no actual progression that you feel as a player. The only progression is a cold representation of data on your screen. Your numbers are higher. You have more skills on your bar, you have more paragon points, and you just have more of numbers, not actual power that you feel as a character. Progression should make you feel stronger when hitting monsters, but this only happens in a few spikes. When you get a strong new ability or an ultimate, or even a key passive, which is valid, but they're just too far and few in between. When you can also loot an actual weapon that also has the good stats and also is a legendary that also gives you the right power for your build. So many conditions. When you hit a level cap for the world tier is also another time when you can feel stronger, like level 50 or higher for world tier 2, where world tier 2 stops scaling monsters at level 50, 70 for world tier 3, 90 for 4. Instead of feeling small power gains for 99 levels, you feel it slightly stronger for 3 instances, and then it doesn't matter because you will swap to a higher world tier anyway for better experience, loot, and so on. Nightmare dungeons as a content will never make you feel like you are progressing, since you will always want to increase the level of the nightmare dungeons for better loot and better experience, and you will always feel like you are at the exact same strength or possibly lower, with the only sign of your power being another number on your screen, the dungeon level. Power should feel through levels. What's the point of levels if it's just a number that increases and is not proportional to your power felt while playing? And I'm not talking about the fact that you do 2000 hits at level 30 while you do 20 damage at level 10. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that even though your number on your screen is big, the monsters take more hits to die, and it's just weird. This is nothing new, but people are still disliking it tremendously. They are vocal in the game, clearly, and they are vocal online. Even 2 months after the game released, Reddit posts like this still rank up more votes than it should. The devs have addressed a lot of other things, but not scaling. Scaling cannot be fixed or patched in a season, but it would be nice for them to acknowledge that it's an issue with enjoying the game and maybe say something like, okay, in a couple of seasons we're gonna get this fixed or changed, but likely this is probably an expansion level feature. Still, there are so many ways to create a similar experiences in the game without the scaling. You can have zones with monsters of a certain level. World tier 1 can have the same zones scaled as they are, while world tier 2 can add 10 levels on top of that and scale to 50 in Hausar, and so on with other world tiers. You can keep the world tiers but introduce mini capstone dungeons that increase the level of the monsters in that world by 10 every time you complete it, or 15 or 20, giving you a bigger chunk of your leveling experience where you start to dominate monsters for more levels at a time. You can keep scaling as it is if it's impossible to remove, but you can make items that drop at your level or more always. No negotiation, no discussion. If I'm level 30, don't let me loot a level 25 sword. It just sucks when no monster is level 25 in the game if I'm level 30. You can also lower the HP and damage of monsters pre-level 50. That will just make the beginning part of the leveling experience a lot more straightforward, even though the end game part of leveling still has its own issues. You can also give classes aspects that are strong for a few of their core abilities, but do not scale past level 50 so as to not break the end game. This cannot be fixed overnight, I understand, but if gone unchanged, this might forever taint the feeling of the game for new players and old players alike. In all fairness, they are listening to certain things, and good stuff is coming to the game. Check this video out where we covered the most relevant buffs that will change your leveling experience for the foreseeable future.